Hi, this is Curt Robbins from Higher Learning LV in Las Vegas, and welcome to Curt's Cannabis Corner. In this week's episode, we're talking about two states that don't get a lot of attention in the media, and that's South Dakota and Maine. And we have a couple subject matter experts, people who work in the legal cannabis industry in those states with us today. Daniel Asarch from Las Vegas, who also has a lot of business ties and family ties in South Dakota, and Colleen Kibler from Maine, who is a licensed caregiver there and also manages a legal medical dispensary.
Super. Thank you, Curt, for introducing this topic. I think, when we talk about legal cannabis, we oftentimes talk about what's going on in the big media centers, particularly with what's happened last year in New York and New Jersey, getting a lot of attention. Daniel Asarch has a fantastic story to share with everyone. He is a licensed pharmacist. So he comes from the traditional pharmacological universe, has a South Dakota hemp company called Happy Hemp Farms. And
Happy Hemp Farms. Cool logo.
Is an activist in South Dakota. So tell us what's going on in South Dakota, because it's got some unique attributes. The first state to really bundle together after a couple of initial failures, medical and adult use cannabis on the same ballot.
South Dakota was the very first state in history that actually had medical and recreational on the same ballot, and they end up both passing. Pretty much both medical cannabis and recreational cannabis got over, I think it was over 200,000 votes, and also even more than the governor when she got elected.
It's impressive in a state with only 886,000 residents.
25% of the entire population came out in support of legal cannabis. And how'd that happen, Daniel? What happened with the governor, Kristi Noem?
Well, South Dakota has been trying to get medical at least since 2016. This was the third time that it was on the ballot. So the governor basically came out with a lawsuit. You guys voted for it, but I don't like it.
I think her argument was something like, you voted for it, but you didn't understand the implication it would have on our police department. And so because I know better than you, the citizens will go ahead and overrule your vote.
Democracy in action.
Not the first time that's happened recently.
Right.
So basically saying we're okay with medical, but we're not so sure about adult use here in South Dakota. But you also have just recently passed hemp. I see the Happy Hemp Farm behind you, which is your concern there. And also you have a huge indigenous population there.
Some of the tribes had already passed the cannabis initiative way before the election, even.
That's right.
Governor Noem vetoed the hemp bill as well, because like I said, anything cannabis related, whether it's hemp or cannabis.
I didn't realize she had vetoed the hemp bill as well.
Well, Colleen Kibler is a licensed caregiver in the state of Maine, and Maine is a small market. It's like South Dakota with respect to very small numbers. We're always talking about New York, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and that's great because there's a lot of exciting things going on in those states.
It's interesting what we were hearing about before with pushback from the government, because we struggled with the same thing here in the state of Maine. We passed medical cannabis. It was vetoed by Governor LePage a number of times. It took a really long time to get the recreational aspect to open up. And that actually just happened really for the first time, last year. Costs a lot to get the licensing. And so most of the facilities that you see, and there are hundreds of other facilities, are licensed cannabis caregivers. The rules to be a caregiver are, different. Caregivers have to be local. The way that the rules are set up for our businesses is entirely different.
That's right.
In the state of Maine, caregivers are absolutely allowed to have retail storefronts. So I'm one of those people who plays a couple of different roles. I'm a licensed caregiver and I grow my own cannabis here, but I also work under another caregiver in his retail facility at a business that's operated by a caregiver whose laws are different than the dispensary down the street.
In the caregiver system, are you taking donations or are you making sales?
It used to be donations. Caregivers are taking money and paying the state sales taxes. You need to have an LLC. You have to have all that stuff set up so that you can deal directly with the state with your purchases. Your patients are going to have patient cards with a patient ID number, and you're intended to keep track of all all of these things.
And then in terms of homegrown, can the average citizen grow their own?
Depending on your licensure, depending on what, what kind of cards and what kind of license you have, you may be able to grow more.
You have to have a card.
How much you can grow, how much you can keep, whether or not you can transact it. All of those things are tied up in the level of licensure.
Years, that's kind of analogous to Colorado in the early days, and it's not sustainable. It's just not enforceable. So what you've got is you've got the home grow. So I can grow my own if I'm growing my own. I've got the caregiver I can grow for other people as long as I manage it within that system. I can be a medical dispensary, which means I can appeal to a larger audience, and then I can be an adult use purveyor as well.
And the system as is not a sustainable system.
And what's interesting about South Dakota and Maine, for me, is that they're super rural states. For me, those rural underserved markets, they need caregivers. They need the local providers. Hemp and cannabis coming into the market, you would think these would be economic boom times. You're a cannabis pharmacist and you're living in Vegas and you're running a South Dakota hemp company.
It's a smaller market, so it's actually easier to get into it. It hasn't been saturated by everybody and their mother per se. Governor Nome, she allowed for alcohol delivery to be made to the home, but has an issue with cannabis.
South Dakota is a traditional value state, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yay alcohol, yay tobacco, screw cannabis.
Yeah. They've also finally got the hemp program going this year, and so they had to submit to the USDA for federal approval. They finally got that this year. So far, they've licensed about 300 acres. South Dakota is a very agricultural state.
Yeah,
sure is. Yeah.
So hopefully they can use that to their advantage to boost their economy.
Well, they're looking to sell that demon Delta 8 and Delta 10 stuff, aren't they?
Alana Armstrong in Toronto, you have a story about Maine.
A study explores whether cannabis can mitigate the anxiety and pain of lobsters about to be cooked.
Lobsters. Ah, there you go.
I saw that.
Should I read a little bit and we can share?
Yeah, rock lobster.
Maine restaurateurs' viral attempt to find a more humane way to cook lobsters by exposing them to cannabis has sparked a scientific study regarding whether or not the cod crustaceans could benefit from ingesting pot before being boiled in one. Charlotte owner.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Charlotte Gill, owner of Charlotte's legendary lobster pound in Maine, gained notoriety for hotboxing a lobster named Roscoe that was later released back into the ocean for his service. Wanting to see if the smoke would help him chill out, she found it apparently did, although the state swiftly requested that Gill end the practice immediately. Inspired by Gill, a team of researchers from 4 different U.S. universities built a sealed cage for lobsters in the study and then pumped in vapor containing THC via a modified e-cigarette device for 30 to 60 minutes. Researchers collected muscle, brain, and chemolymph tissues from the animals following the exposure and conducted experiments assessing the locomotor behavior. And unfortunately for the lobsters, getting baked did little to reduce the misery of being boiled. So
Speed is not a panacea, boys and girls.
Oh my gosh.
The proof.
Scientists found no indication that the THC had any effect on decreasing the pain they experienced.
So, Colleen, is that what's going on in Maine?
Apparently, yes. Are
you proud or embarrassed?
I'm originally from Texas, so that story is hilarious to me. I think that's a riot.
Would you recommend a butter-based topical?
Perhaps like breadcrumb scrub at the end. Like, yes.
You guys are making me hungry. You have to stop.
I know. Maine is the first state in the nation to drop medical qualifications to get a medical card.
That's right.
Patients who didn't qualify to get a med card, but that needed cannabis, don't have access in other states. I mean, it's kind of politics drawing this line of how sick are you? Are you sick enough? What is sick enough? I think that's a horrendous thing. I'm thankful that the state of Maine has gotten rid of that rule, because at this point, people who are sick but may not have the right diagnosis or, are able to access medicine. I'm a seizure patient, but they won't qualify my seizures as epilepsy. That's what you have to be an epileptic in most states to get medicated. The argument is, is it now, are you really just recreational with thing?
I can see cynics saying that. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing that they've done. I think it's super beneficial to patients like myself who don't have the right diagnosis.
The rec market has historically subsumed that medical market, but the problem has been that the products don't necessarily follow through.
So the recreational market is catering to patients who want to get high. They already know they like to smoke weed. They want to get stoned. They know where they're at. They're ready to go. Right. What Daniel, with his hemp products, the people that he's trying to reach have a completely different goal. And so I think that the market is there. Those patients they don't necessarily need to be found. They're everywhere. Everybody has a need for, CBD and anti-inflammation. Everybody, that's a true maintenance medication and a preventative medicine. They don't need to be found. They need to be educated. Will the recreational market overcome the medical market? I think the medical market is there. I think that in the rush to tap into the people who are ready right now, we're missing the fact that cannabinoids like CBD are preventative and maintenance medicines, meaning of us need them all of the time, meaning the patients that I see that aren't looking to get stoned, they're chronic patients. They're sick and they need their medicine every day, every week, every month. That's a huge market. That's what the pharmaceutical market is eating up.
Daniel, you're a pharmacist. Jump in there.
Yeah, the West Coast, like you said, doesn't treat cannabis as a medicine. More East Coast, like New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Maryland, so Louisiana. They have pharmacists working in the dispensaries. Even Utah, they have pharmacists in the dispensaries. I believe that a pharmacist should be in a dispensary, work along with bud tenders. I do see cannabis as a potential medicine for a lot of different things. I know we have thousands and thousands of years of research on it, but according to the FDA, we don't. I think that pharmacists will play an important role, once federal legalization happens. And there's a lot of drug interactions that people don't realize with THC and CBD, especially people on a lot of blood thinners. THC interacts with that, causes to thin the blood even more.
But most bud tenders are not real educated on that, unfortunately. So there is true value in having someone with your type of knowledge in the organization, Daniel.
The Cannabis Health Index,
right,
which is a magnificently large book. I can't do what Daniel can do as a pharmacist. I cannot. But it is my responsibility. In my opinion, it's my responsibility to have as much information either under my belt or at my fingertips as humanly possible.
And what kind of dosages are you selling to your patients in Maine?
I've got, my shop carries up to a 500 milligram gummy. I've got chocolate bars. My big sellers are 300 milligrams. My caramel big seller is 100 milligram caramel. I'll start patients who are doing edibles. I'll start them with 10 milligram gummies. And I think the edible space is the fastest growing because I think it's the easiest for people to think they can get into. The thing about having higher dosage in a package, especially on the medical side, is that if we're treating this like a medicine, you can't buy 600 candy bars. You're buying one chocolate bar.
And of course, don't forget suppositories. Daniel,
one of the best methods in the world.
Super effective, right?
Innuendo. Yeah,
it's absolutely the most effective absorption method. You can avoid the high this way. So we can medicate cancer patients with very high levels of THC if we use suppositories. That's a great point. It's one of the best medicines out there. It's really hard to have that conversation. People don't want to have that conversation with me. Cancer patients don't want to spend 6, 8, 9, 10 months stoned.
Well, besides cancer patients, though, you also have women who have a lot of pelvic inflammatory disease and a lot of pain,
Absolutely.
And like vaginal suppositories with THC and CBD. But also everybody metabolizes everything different. So me and Dave could take the same gummy, and it may not do anything to me, or vice versa. Or it may hit me super hard, and him, it was like,
excellent point.
That didn't do anything, And then also people develop tolerance to THC levels. So instead of taking one chocolate bar at 100 milligrams. Now you're going to have to eat 3 chocolate bars to get that same effect.
Daniel's right about that tolerance thing. It's not just cannabis patients who get a cannabis tolerance. It's cannabis patients who have been on heavy pain-killing regimens in the past also have massive tolerances. My patients that are overcoming opioid addictions, it's hard to believe how much cannabis they can consume before they get the effect that I'm looking for. I also see people who go home and accidentally leave their edible out and their dog eats it. We don't want them eating a 500 milligram anything. And that's why we have to do more education about, how edibles work. And
I am a pharmacist, been one for about 16 years, and I've been in the cannabis space and hemp space for the last couple. You can find me on Instagram at Happy Hemp Farm, all together one word. And you also have a website, www.happyhempfarm.com, and also have a page on Facebook, same thing, Happy Hemp Farms. I have tinctures. I have a roll-on for pain relief. I have a cream coming out soon,
Nice.
smokable flower, as well as I do make some boutique bath products like sugar or hemp-infused sugar scrubs, as well as hemp-infused soap. And the hemp oil that I do use is full spectrum, but is actually dominant in CBDA, which is not a lot of products out there. So if you know anything about CBDA,
Love it.
it's 100 times stronger than CBD, so you don't have to use as much, absorbed by the body better, and it hits the 5-HT receptors a lot stronger, the ones that handle like nausea, sleep.
It's a better bioavailability.
Thank you for this great conversation. I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. It was good to talk to you about smaller states. It felt good actually to have that conversation and to be welcomed into it. I am managing a shop in Waterville, Maine called Maple Valley Farms, and you can find me on Instagram at Duchess of Indica with underscores between each word. Thanks again for having me, Curt.
Thanks, Colleen. And Alana Armstrong in Toronto with Alan Aldous, the coolest PR agency out there.
You can find me at Alan Aldous, alanaldous.com. You can reach out to me and we can talk about stoned lobsters. We can talk about lobster rolls. We can talk about any crustaceans, really.
Do you guarantee any crustacean?
So you can find me, Lana Armstrong, on all social media. I hope to see you next week.
Thanks, Alana. And of course, David Rhines, Executive Director of the Marijuana Business Association in beautiful Seattle, Washington.
Thank you, Curt. Thank you, everyone, for another great discussion. Yeah, today's discussion of legalization and how it's impacting smaller markets is the lead story in my movie, which is #mainstreaming marijuana. What happens in South Dakota? What happens in Maine? What happens in hometown America and hometown Canada really defines what legalization looks like. It's a lot of sticky issues. It's how do we deal with local markets? How do we deal with patients? But this is the fight. This is really the last mile. Think global, act local.
Thanks, David. Well, that wraps another episode of Curt's Cannabis Corner. Join us next week.